drum room. Okay, so today we're gonna be talking about how to get your MIDI drums to sound realistic and like real drums without using velocity. While velocity is still the best way to make your MIDI drums sound real, there's still an extra 15-20% that you're missing after. And this is a technique that I use in almost every single mix I have MIDI drums in, because they're missing this one element to ensure that your drums sound real and alive. If you're at all struggling with getting your MIDI drums to sound real, or are just looking to expand your mixing knowledge, stick around for this amazing technique on how to create a drum room for your MIDI drums. Also, if you haven't already, there's an EQ and compression guide that you can pick up for free right below this video. The first link should be that link to the EQ and compression guide. You can pick that up for free to help you in your journey of getting professional mixes. Today, I'm gonna show you how to make your MIDI drums sound real without using velocity. Before I get into this, let me just say that using velocity to actually code your drums, if you will, does make the biggest difference in making your drums sound real. However, even if you do have real sounding velocities inside of your MIDI drums, they can still sound a little lackluster. Today I'm going to show you exactly how I set up additional buses to make my MIDI drums sound even more real than they already do. This is going to be my secret sauce, so make sure you pay attention. The first step is send your entire drum bus to an additional bus. And so what I'm really going to be doing here is I'm going to be creating an additional, basically, room for our drum bus. Normally when we record real drums, we close mic everything, and then there's also two overheads which capture the entire drum set, and then there's two room mics which then create also the entire drum set inside of the room that they're being recorded in. And they really capture not only just the sound of the drum set and everything kind of glued together, but also the sound of the room. And so that's really what we're going to be creating today, is a nice stereo image of our drum set that is capturing the room, and then we can actually compress that to make it sound really, really thick and nice. And really the way that a lot of big drums are created is by using these room mics. That's what we're gonna basically recreate, because a lot of MIDI drums don't do great in terms of getting that room sound unless you have a premium version. The drums that are in this song are just the Logic stock drums. They have a little bit of like room sound in each individual track, but they don't have a separate room channel that we can then process to create this nice glue and heaviness for the drums. The first step is going to add a reverb plugin. I'm gonna go find a room. I'm gonna use just probably a studio room here. Let's see what sounds good. I'm gonna play around with some presets here, find out which one I like most. I like the sound of this kind of darker room. This is what we're gonna use for our drum room. I'm gonna time our decay as well. Okay, that sounds good. So one item that you probably want to think about when you're actually creating this drum room is making sure that you pick a dense room, or if you don't pick a dense room, increasing the density of the room, because a lot of drum hits are very, very transient heavy, and so you'll be able to hear those reflections in the room, which generally sounds bad. That's why a lot of studio drum rooms have a lot of reflective surfaces to break up those hard reflections, so there's no flat walls, and it'll create this nice wash of sound rather than individual reflections, which really don't sound that good with drums specifically. And then what I did here was just create a curve so that I'm cutting off a lot of the high and low ends, and then also just a little bit around 1K. What this does is it just makes the reverb sound a little bit more rounded, and it doesn't muddy up the mix too much in the low or top end. So a lot of reverbs can sound a little bit too harsh in the top end if you leave those really, really high end. So I'm just kind of slowly tapering off those extremes there. And then if you have too much 1K in your reverb, sometimes it'll sound a little bit cheap. So I'm cutting out quite a bit of that, and I just based on what I've heard so far, I really like the sound of how this is shaping up so far. What we're gonna do next is I'm gonna add some compression, and this is a very, very common technique with if you actually have real drum room tracks inside of your song. We're going to be compressing this very, very heavily, and then I'm going to just mix it in just a little bit. So right now it's gonna sound really, really extreme what I'm doing, but just stick with me and you'll see the end product of how this is actually going to turn out in the end. And I'm going to use one of my favorite compressors, a distressor, to compress this drum room. I'm going to be getting some extreme compression on this, and that is completely intentional. That's what I want. If you haven't picked up my compression guide yet, you can find that for free in the link, but also that compression guide goes over the 4 styles of compression. Specifically, in this case, I'm going to be using a thickness type compression, and so that's going to be attacking the transients and then emphasizing the tails of the notes. So really all I'm doing is increasing the volume of those tails and making the drum sound really, really thick. Again, this is going to be in parallel to the drum bus, so I'm not sending my whole drum bus into this drum room, but it's happening in parallel, so I can add a lot of that thickness room reverb sound to the drum set to make the drums feel really big without actually impacting any of the punchiness of the drums themselves. This is a fantastic technique too. If your drums just don't sound big enough, this is what to do. Let's continue on with our Okay, so now it's time to actually add this back into the track. I'm gonna take it all the way back down, and I'm gonna slowly bring it up until I really feel that added thickness to the drums and added power, bigness, and then I'm gonna back it off just a little bit. So, because I don't want this to be super obvious, but I do want it to be enhancing the drums so they feel more real. So let's listen to the context of the mix, and we'll see what difference it makes in the entire mix. So you may feel like that's really subtle, and it's relatively subtle, but it's making a massive difference in how those drums really blend in with each other, and then also as the mix as a whole. This was my technique to make MIDI drums sound more real without using velocity. Again, just to review really quick, what I did so far is that I moved my drum bus, I routed that through a secondary bus, routed that bus back into my mix bus so that everything's being funneled through my mix bus in the end. Added a room reverb, which then got compressed very heavily in my drum room here. And then you just mixed it in just a little bit. So this is going to be adding that thickness of the room sound for your drums, and specifically MIDI drums that don't have a good room channel to utilize for this technique. You can just create your own room for your drums. So I hope this was super helpful for you. If you want to, feel free to play more with different effects that you can use on the drum room. Sometimes I'll add some distortion to get a little bit more aggressive and thickness out of the drum room, but play around with it, have fun, and I hope that this was helpful to be able to make your drums sound more alive inside of your mix. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to see more fun videos every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. With that said, have a fantastic day. In the darkest night, you and me, we have